Today we'd like to introduce Paul Keating, former Prime Minister of Australia. Mr. Keating first became Prime Minister in December 1991 and led the Australian Labor Party to a historic fifth term of government in March 1993. Throughout his time as Prime Minister, he continued his progressive reform program, which included the establishment of National Training Authority, a national superannuation scheme to readdress low national savings and labour market, and training reforms which addressed Australia's long-term unemployment problems. Paul, glad you could come and talk to us.
Action.
Thank you for having me.
Action.
Paul, some of your most profound achievements of your government included the review of the Sex Discrimination Act, the historic Mabo legislation, which recognized the land rights of Australia's Indigenous people, and the introduction of legislation ensuring the protection of endangered species. In your opinion, which improvement of your government was most influential?
Action.
Well, my Redfern speech on Aboriginal reconciliation in December of 1992 is cited as among the greatest speeches ever delivered in Australian political history. This speech was the first to acknowledge the impact of European settlement on Indigenous Australians. The address reflected a changing official interpretation of Australian history, which better accommodated the Aboriginal experience, and I thought the end result of the speech was positive and impacted the most people possible. Of course, the efforts for this problem have not ceased, and our government is still working to better the relationship between the Native people and other Australians.
Action.
So would you say the improvement in relations with the Indigenous peoples is the most significant change you've implemented?
Yes, that's correct. Throughout my time as Prime Minister, this was the largest problem that I tackled, and I even met with the Indonesian President Suharto to discuss it.
Interesting point. So as you said, you had a friendship with President Suharto. Did that go over smoothly with the general public overall?
Action.
This was criticized by human rights activists supportive of East Timorese independence. Not only that, but my government's cooperation with the Indonesian military and the signing of the Timor Gap Treaty were also analyzed negatively. The problem with this is that after these problems, many believe that I overlooked alleged human rights abuses by the Indonesian government as part of my effort to increase Australia's cultural, diplomatic, and economic ties with Asia.
Action.
So going back to your national superannuation scheme, can you tell us more about that and elaborate?
This legislative decision was implemented to address the long-term problem of low national savings. This built on policies that I'd introduced while my term as Treasurer and was aimed at ensuring that most Australians would have enough money to retire.
Action.
Very interesting, Mr. Keating. As a prominent figure in your country's history, were you ever awarded anything for your achievements in office?
Action.
In April of 2003, I was awarded a Doctorate of Laws from the UNSW in recognition of the economic and legislative reforms overseen by me and my work fostering better relations in the Asian Pacific region.
Action.
So before you were Prime Minister, you were appointed Treasurer of Australia. How was that? Can you tell us more?
Previously, Bob Hawke, who preceded me as Prime Minister, established the Hawke government. When I became Treasurer, I was one of the major driving forces between the various extensive macro and microeconomic reforms of the Hawke government. I tried to pursue economic policies such as floating the Australian dollar in 1983 and reducing tariffs on imports. Other things are reforming the tax system and moving from centralized wage fixing to enterprise bargaining.
Action.
When you campaigned for Prime Minister of Australia, what did you focus on to promote?
I particularly focused on attacking the proposed goods and service tax, arguing that it would make unemployment worse and would provide a dead weight to the economy. After a long process, I secured my spot as Prime Minister and began promoting and implementing my policies.
Action.
And for my last question, what reforms did you add to assist the expansion of the Australian economy?
In.
Some of my most important changes included the progressive deregulation of the financial sector, the float of the Australian dollar, extensive tax reform, and the dismantling of many protectionist barriers. For me, the biggest thing was to emphasize Australia's ties with Asia and the importance of competing in a global economy.
Very good point, Mr. Keating. Thank you for your time and your contribution to Australia's history as well as Oceania's. We enjoyed having you with us today, and we hope we can talk to you again soon.